Hey guys, Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today in this video we're going to talk about finishing up our brass prep. In the last video we showed you how to or how I properly size and shoulder bump brass, full length size, for optimal precision. And this video I'm recording on the same day in an effort to try to get these videos to you guys at the same time. So those of you that are in the camp of need to prep brass in order to get ready for the testing, I'm going to show you guys, so you guys can get going on your brass if you don't already have it sized, or if you did size it but didn't do it this way and want to attempt to redo it. So what we have left is after we full length size our brass, it grows in length and it's full of lube, so we need to take care of those two things. The first thing I'll do is throw it in my Frankfurt Arsenal vibratory case tumbler, which is plain corncob media or corncob and walnut mix or whatever, in an effort to just get the lube off. I don't care if they get shiny or not, but I'll just throw them in there for 2 or 3 hours just to get all the lube off and give them a quasi-uniform appearance. You can wet tumble at that point. If you want to try to get all the grime out of them and off them and all that. But just know that wet tumbling usually rounds over the case mouth, so you're going to have a little bit more of a fight when you want to chamfer and deburr. And then also too, that gets the inside of the neck squeaky clean, which this, I could derail on this, but I don't want to. If the inside of the neck is spotless, you can get a phenomenon called cold welding, where if you load the ammo, basically the inside of the neck is so clean that with the tight tolerance and tight fit it has with the bullet you're putting in it, so here's your neck, you seat your bullet in there, that super tight fit you have, and clean surface on clean surface, over time, if it's left to sit for long enough, the case neck and the bullet will start to exchange molecules, and they'll kind of cold weld themselves together. And that can cause tremendous pressure issues because the bullet isn't in effect partially welded to the case. And you'll know this phenomenon has happened if you take some ammo you've had loaded for a long time and you put it in your seating die and you go to, just seat it 20 thousandths deeper or something. When you go to seat it deeper, you'll hear a snap. And that's what that is it's busting that weld loose. So that's the main reason I don't wet tumble. I do have a wet tumbler, but I don't use it that often for that reason, because a lot of times once I get a finished load that I know shoots well, I'll load up some of those so I have them on standby, and I don't know when I'm going to shoot them. And they can sit for long periods of time. So that's why I don't usually wet tumble. I'll instead dry tumble, because that leaves the carbon residue on the inside of the neck so that there's something between the neck and the bullet, which helps prevent that cold welding. So after we tumble it to get the lube off, take it out, and then it's ready for, usually the brass is too long and it needs to be trimmed. So in this video, I'm going to show you the videos that I recorded last fall on what I do for the remainder of the prep process, which is trimming the brass to length, whatever length I determine I want to trim it to. It doesn't really matter what that length is. A lot of times you'll find a recommended trim to length for a 308, let's say it's 2.005. It doesn't really matter if you trim it to that number. That's just a recommended number. You can trim it to kind of whatever you want. Just know that if it gives you a max length, if you go a little bit, if you get too much past that max length, like too much longer past that max length, sometimes the round won't chamber because the case mouth is bottoming out in the end of the chamber. So you do need to trim it, but don't feel like you have to trim it to whatever the trim to or minimum length is. That number doesn't hold any significance. It's just a ballpark place for you to trim to, but you can trim it to kind of whatever you want. And then after you trim it, I'm going to be using our world's finest trimmer. After you trim it, you have to do something with the case mouth. And the way our trimmers are designed, they don't really leave a burr on the outside of the case mouth. So you don't really need to deburr. We do still recommend that you chamfer the inside of the case mouth to help prevent the case mouth from shearing off jacket material and causing inconsistency there. But as far as the outside of the mouth, you don't really have to deburr if you don't want to. I just do it out of habit because I've done it my whole life, but our trimmer's cut so clean that you don't have to do that. And then you'll see through the rest of the process how I get the chamfering and deburring and that sort of thing done. So I'll show you that quick, and then after that we'll go right into how I see primers, which, excuse me, I've told you guys that I just use the RCBS hand primer. So I did a little video on that. Well, I'll show you that too, and then I think we'll come back and talk about a couple extra things and put a bow on this. Alright, I'm going to quickly walk you guys through the brass prep or brass trimming and prep process. I'm going to explain it with everything turned off because it's all noisy, and once I start I won't be saying anything. So what I do is I like to set everything up like this. We have our World's Finest Trimmer number 2 with our 308 Winchester insert, trim chamber insert in place and already set to trim all of the brass at least 1/1000th. So I found the shortest piece, and then I set it to take at least 1/1000th off that shortest piece, so all the brass will get trimmed. I don't pay so much attention to the exact trim length. Like you'll see for a 308, the recommended trim to length is 2.005. I don't really care about that number. I'm just trimming to the shortest one minus 1/1000th, so that I know that they all get trimmed. Whether or not it ends up at 2.005 does not matter. That's just a reference, so you have a recommended spot to trim to, but that number doesn't hold any significance. So what I'll do is I'll take a piece of brass that has been sized and cleaned, and then I'll trim it first, and then I also, for each cartridge that I reload, I like to get a neck sizing die. And really the only reason I want the neck sizing die is so that if I end up pulling bullets, like if I go out to load something and I end up not shooting it for whatever reason and I come home and pull the bullet out, I like to be able to reset the neck tension, and I'll just generically do it with a neck sizing die. So that's what this is, and I have that in place just because I want to make use of the expander ball that's inside this die, not because I intend to resize the neck. So what I'm going to do is, what my process is I trim the brass, and then I run it into the die just enough so the expander goes through the neck and comes back out. So I'm uniforming the case mouth. Then I'll use this VLD chamfer tool. You know, for me, trimming and brass prep is all about speed because it's by far the worst process as far as reloading is concerned, if you ask me. I hate this more than anything. So for me, it's about economy and speed. So I trim, use the expander to uniform the case mouth, then I chamfer the inside, deburr the outside. When I deburr, I'll hold the case at an angle like this, and I actually turn it clockwise while the cutter is turning counterclockwise. So I'm basically turning the edge into the cutter. So I'll do that to remove the burr. I check it with my fingers to make sure the burr is completely gone. Then I'll brush it. Then I run the expander through it again. So that way the last thing to go through the neck is a smooth expander to smooth out any imperfections that might be inside the neck. And you'll see that by the time we get all that done and we check our fully prepped neck, we started with 3/1000 neck tension because of the bushing that was in our sizing die, but by the time you do all this, it reduces that neck tension by about 1/1000th. So remember, our loaded neck was 336. Now this will be at 334 instead of 333, which is the bushing we used in our sizing die. So running this through here twice takes off 1/1000th of neck tension, and it ends up working a lot like an expander mandrel, which is why I don't use expander mandrels, because they're not necessary. So I'm probably going to do 5 pieces or so you can see the process, but once I start here, I'm not going to be saying anything because obviously it's loud and there's a lot of noise and whatever. You won't be able to hear me anyway, so we'll get this started. Alright, once I've completed all those steps, then this brass is, outside of needing a primer, this brass is ready to load. Alright, so now that the brass is fully prepped and ready to go, I already primed all the cases. I'll just give you a little information on what we're doing for that. And then as far as seating primers, I wanted to tell you guys what I'm doing, or what I use to seat primers. I use a very complicated method for seating primers. I use a high-speed, low-drag, often imitated, never duplicated, air-cooled, tray-fed, RCBS hand priming tool. Holy cow. Let's get fancy with priming cases. I know lately there's been development in different ways of seating a primer, and there's different tools out there for that now. Some of them are extremely expensive, and people are losing their marbles over trying to get the perfect amount of primer crush. I'm going to tell you guys, I have not seen any difference in anything measuring primer crush. So, the way I prime a case, use my handy dandy priming tool here. Get your primers in there. I don't use the snap-on lid that comes with it, because I find that trying to get that lid in place, all that does is flip half the primers over, so I don't use that. So I just lay them in there, make sure they're all pointed up the way they should be. And then when I prime a case, snap it in there. I'll push the primer about halfway in, release the pressure, rotate the case a little bit, push it all the way in, and then release the pressure, rotate it again, and then use both hands to put all the mustard I can on it to make sure that it's seated as deep as this tool will seat it. And whatever amount of crush or whatever seating depth that is, it is. Usually the primer, depending on the depth of the primer pocket, it ends up being just below flush. How much, I don't care, because in my experience it doesn't matter. And that's it. That's all the more complicated we get with seating primers. Okay, so you see I don't get too fancy with seating primers. As long as they're seated out in, all the way to the bottom of the primer pocket, I don't worry about it. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was the chamfering and deburring. I use that RCBS TrimMate Prep Center, but what I want you guys to keep in mind is that, like I said, I don't really want this to be about equipment, so it doesn't really matter how you achieve those steps. I just wanted you to see what steps I do and in what order. How you achieve them is kind of up to you. Like, I know some guys take pride in using as little electronics and electricity to do this stuff as they can. They like to do a lot of things manually, and that's cool. So I guess whatever tools you use to do it doesn't matter that much. Just you saw what we're trying to get done. And a couple things I wanted to mention that are different than what I use in the video is one tool that we create, that Dale created and that we sell, that's really popular, is our precision prep tool called the PPT. So this is a aluminum handle and head on it that has a sealed bearing in it that houses all the different prep tools you might want to use for your brass. And the bearing allows this to spin freely. So you can put whatever tools you want on here for case prep. Like if some of you guys, I know we sell a lot of these, so I know there's guys of you watching this that have these at home. This one happens to be green. We don't make these anymore. We just make them in silver. But at any rate, a lot of you guys have these. And if you're not shooting massive volume like I do, this can be more than enough for what you need for finishing the case prep. And it's a very simple tool because of the bearing. It allows you to chamfer and deburr simply by hand. And it's a really quick process to do this. And again, this is a really popular tool. So this can be a way for you to achieve the case prep stuff that I showed in the video. And then also we have another tool called the PPT hex adapter. And what it is it's basically a threaded boss that is about 1 inch long, and it's like hex shape on the outside. It allows you to put that hex adapter into your drill and then thread each of these individual tools into that hex adapter. So if you want to use your drill to do these steps one at a time, you can do that in your drill, and we sell that adapter on our website too. So again, I didn't want to get too mired down in the equipment. I just wanted to let you guys know that what we're trying to achieve. So you could see the steps and see what I do and in what order. How you get it done is really up to you. Just make sure you get all those steps done, and that's going to put you in the best position for your case to provide consistency for your loads going forward. So now that I've gone through all the case prep, you guys that were waiting and had brass that needed to be prepped, you can get going on that. And I think next, what I was going to do was the next video will be me showing you guys in Gordon's reloading tool, like, okay, we have this new gun, we need to break the barrel in. We went and got fired water capacity. We have a powder we're trying to get rid of, and we have, or maybe not, whatever. In this case, I use breaking in barrels as a way to burn up old inventory. So I'll show you how I went through that process and like how I selected the powders and what charge weights I selected to go out and just shoot a few groups through the gun to try to find a candidate to use to break the barrel in. And then, so I'll show you that. And then I think after that, we'll go into me actually going out and breaking in the barrel. There's a lot of different ways to break in a barrel. A lot of guys will just go to the range and blow through box after box of ammo. And you can do that. To me, it's kind of boring. So what I'll do is, what I'm going to show you in the next video, I'll basically find a couple contenders that shoot adequately enough to give me some decent precision. And then I'll load up the remaining rounds that I want to use to break in the barrel, and I'll go shoot at long range and go out and get some practice with a load that I just haphazardly slapped together, that I did no load development on whatsoever. Just throw it together, load up 100 of them or whatever the number is, get a good zero, go out and bang away and have some fun. And in that video too, I'll show you how I clean rifles. And but I just want to get this case prep stuff over with, so those of you guys that are waiting and want to get your brass ready for the coming testing, you can do that in the meantime. And then next, like I say, we'll go into how I selected charge weights and powders and whatever, and what I picked to break the barrel in. And then once the barrel's broken, we'll start getting down into the meat and potatoes of, all right, now we're going to start working on ladder tests, and we're going to start figuring out what we use for charge weights and what we test and what I look for and where we go from there. So I think that's it. Again, as always, I really appreciate you guys. This is going really well. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. Like, subscribe, share with your buddies, all that good stuff. We'll see you on the next one.